If you were born into chaos, pain, or abandonment, it wasn't by accident. It was the fire needed to forge something unbreakable. Strong souls are not handed peace. They are trained by storms. The soul, in its deepest essence, does not crave what the world chases: comfort, ease, luxury, or external peace. These are desires of the mind, of the body, of the conditioned self. But the soul is an ancient warrior. It comes not to rest, but to rise. It doesn't seek silence that comes from lack of noise, but the silence that comes after a storm. And when a soul is strong, truly strong, it doesn't choose the softest pillow in the world to lay its spirit upon. It chooses a battlefield, a storm, a furnace, not because it loves pain, but because it understands that pressure creates transformation, that discomfort is the seedbed of awakening. A strong soul, before birth, chooses terrain that will shape it into something rare, something powerful, something needed. That terrain, for many, is the toxic family. You see, being born into a toxic family is not a cosmic mistake. It is not the universe being cruel or unfair. It is the soul saying, "Give me the exact set of circumstances that will activate my truth." A toxic family becomes that precise container, a place where love is often conditional or withdrawn, a place where validation is replaced with criticism, where presence is replaced with absence. In such a place, the strong soul does not perish. It begins its initiation. Every moment of rejection, every word unspoken, every moment of tension in the home, it becomes weight added to the spiritual barbell, and the soul, it lifts every day, quietly, painfully, but persistently. While many ask, "Why me?" the strong soul eventually asks, "What is this trying to teach me?" That is the difference between those who stay trapped in the wound and those who alchemize the wound into wisdom. Growth does not come wrapped in kindness when your soul's mission is depth. It comes wrapped in difficulty. And though a toxic family may never offer emotional safety, it offers something more piercing: a spiritual edge. The edge that cuts away illusions. The edge that forces self-reflection. The edge that makes the soul remember what the world tries to make it forget: that nothing external defines its worth. Most people would never choose suffering, and yet the soul, in its higher vision, sees what pain can build. It sees what weakness can't handle. And so, when it enters a life surrounded by dysfunction, it already knows, this is the fire that will melt everything that is not me. This is the crucible that will strip away dependence, insecurity, people-pleasing, and the hunger to be accepted by those who cannot even accept themselves. A toxic family is often filled with generations of unhealed trauma. And the strong soul? It chooses to incarnate into that cycle, not to continue it, but to end it, to become the breaker of chains, the one who feels the full weight of ancestral pain and says, "It ends here." This is not a noble fantasy. It is a brutal, lonely, disorienting path, the kind of path that can break the ego 100 times before building a single moment of peace. But still, the soul walks it, not because it must, but because it wants to. Because it knows what will be born from the fire will no longer be wounded. It will be wise. It will be the one who walks into their own chaos and comes out with compassion. The one who walks into the patterns of betrayal and comes out with boundaries. The one who was handed shame and chose to rise with dignity. And all of that begins because the soul chose growth, not comfort, because it saw the flame and walked directly into it. Toxicity, when seen from the surface, appears to be an unfair circumstance, a poison in the environment, an energy that suffocates, drains, or manipulates. Most people flee from it, resist it, curse it, but the strong soul, it does not look away, it does not run, it watches, it listens. Because deep beneath the chaos, toxicity reveals something rare, a sacred mirror. One that doesn't show you who you pretend to be, but who you really are, under pressure, under fear, under emotional fire. And when you are born into a toxic family, this mirror is held before your face from the moment you open your eyes. You do not get to hide behind roles or masks. You are pushed into your emotional depth before you even understand language. You are not allowed the luxury of delay. You are forced into the dojo of self-awareness early and relentlessly. In toxic families, love is often laced with conditions. Approval comes at a cost. Silence is used as a weapon. Criticism is constant, subtle, or manipulative. And within this environment, you either lose yourself entirely or you are forced to discover yourself from the ground up. And that discovery, that brutal, intimate confrontation with your own psyche, becomes the path of self-mastery. You are not given peace, so you learn to generate it. You are not given safety, so you learn to construct it within. You are not given emotional nourishment, so you learn to feed your spirit without permission. That is the training no one sees. That is the invisible discipline you carry, while others wonder why you move through life with such a quiet intensity. The toxicity around you becomes your greatest teacher, not because it's wise, but because it is relentless. It reflects your triggers back to you again and again, forcing you to either be consumed by them or learn how to alchemize them into understanding. When someone gaslights you long enough, you either collapse into self-doubt or you develop an unshakable connection to your own intuition. When someone withdraws love, you either bend your soul for scraps of affection or you learn to stand rooted in self-worth. These are not mere coping mechanisms. These are foundations for inner freedom, but they only form when you refuse to let the poison become your personality. Most people live their whole lives being coddled by polite dysfunction, but those raised in overt toxicity are thrust into the fire. And while it burns, it also clarifies. You begin to see the patterns that rule people, the emotional manipulations, the unhealed wounds dressed as pride, the fear dressed as control. You begin to recognize what others deny, and this clarity, painful as it is, becomes your wisdom. You are trained to read energy, to anticipate emotional danger, to understand what is not being said. This hyper-awareness is not paranoia. It is perception honed by survival, and once you learn to use it consciously, it becomes a superpower. But self-mastery does not come from understanding others alone. It is forged in your reaction to the chaos. Every time you choose silence over retaliation, clarity over confusion, boundaries over guilt, you are sharpening the blade of your own discipline. You are no longer reacting from your wounds. You are responding from your awareness. Toxicity then stops being a curse and becomes a forge, the place where you were not given love, but where you learned to become it. The place where you were not offered peace, but where you learned to embody it. The place where you were constantly pushed into the edge of emotional collapse and where, over time, you built the unshakable center of your own spirit. In families where toxicity brews, silence is rarely peaceful. It is heavy. It is loud in its emptiness. It fills the room with tension that can't be named but can be felt in your skin, in your heartbeat, in the pit of your stomach. It's not the silence of comfort, but of disconnection. The kind where people live under the same roof, yet feel like strangers. Where love is rarely spoken, where presence is more absence than connection, and where emotions sit locked behind facial expressions that refuse to reveal anything real. And for the strong soul born into such an environment, this silence becomes an early and painful teacher. At first, it confuses you. It makes you question your worth. It creates a void, a gap where words, affection, and validation should be. But in that very void, something unexpected begins to awaken. The quiet, persistent voice inside you that no one else can hear. When others fail to speak life into you, your inner self starts whispering truths you didn't know you needed. At first, it's fragile. It competes with doubt, shame, and confusion. But over time, as the external silence continues, the inner voice grows louder, not in volume but in clarity. It begins to ask, What do you feel when no one else bothers to ask how you're doing? It begins to say you are worthy when no one around you knows how to affirm. It becomes your only reliable companion, your secret compass in a world that feels emotionally disconnected. This is how strength is born, not from noise or praise or applause, but from having no choice but to trust your own perception when everyone else is too emotionally blind to see who you truly are. In toxic families, silence is often used as a tool, as punishment, as manipulation, as avoidance. Conversations are left incomplete, emotions are left unspoken, apologies never come, and explanations for hurtful behavior rare, if ever. So you grow up surrounded by question marks. You learn to read between the lines. You learn to decode what is meant but never said. You sense shifts in energy, notice the flicker in someone's eyes, the change in tone. And these subtle observations become survival tools. But eventually, they evolve into intuition, into a powerful inner knowing that tells you what's safe, what's true, and what's false. Not because someone told you, but because you felt it. This is where the inner voice becomes more than just a whisper. It becomes a force, a sacred internal guide that is sharper than logic and deeper than reason. And the beauty of this is that no one can take it away from you. They may try to silence you on the outside, but inside you have built a voice that speaks truth in a language only you understand. When the world is chaotic, that voice anchors you. When people lie to you, that voice reminds you of what's real. When you're tempted to betray yourself just to belong, that voice gently pulls you back. This is the voice of the soul, and it was born in the absence of noise, in the emotional drought of your early environment. While others were spoon-fed guidance and love, you were left alone in a room of silence. And from that silence, you carved a sacred space within yourself that no chaos can penetrate. This is why many strong souls carry a certain stillness. It's not because they've had easy lives, but because they've had to go inward again and again to hear themselves when the world around them refused to listen. They don't need external validation because they've already survived without it. They don't rely on being understood because they've learned to understand themselves. Their strength was built in silence, and their guidance now flows from that very place, calm, clear, and unshakable. There is a particular kind of pain that doesn't just hurt, it awakens. It strips away every illusion you held about love, safety, and belonging. It comes not from strangers or the outside world, but from the people who were supposed to protect you, love you, and teach you how to live with an open heart. When those very people become the source of your wounds, something inside of you is forced to emerge. And that something is not weakness, not self-pity, not surrender. It is the warrior, not the warrior that fights to destroy, but the one who fights to survive first and then to transform. This warrior doesn't wear armor made of ego. This warrior doesn't scream for attention. This warrior is silent, disciplined, and forged entirely through pain. When you grow up surrounded by emotional chaos, yelling that never ends, silence that punishes, expectations that crush your spirit, your nervous system learns to stay alert, to anticipate threat, to read energy before words are spoken. This is the battlefield where the warrior soul is trained, because you're not just fighting for peace, you're fighting for your sanity. You're fighting for your identity. You're fighting for a sense of self that can survive the emotional starvation of being unseen, unheard, and misunderstood. And over time, that fight becomes your training ground. It doesn't make you bitter. It makes you aware. It sharpens your intuition. It teaches you how to stand alone with grace. It teaches you how to sit in pain without running. It teaches you how to face your own suffering without begging someone else to take it away. The warrior within you is not born from victory, but from surviving defeat after defeat. You learn how to carry sadness without it swallowing you. You learn how to walk into rooms where your spirit is not welcomed and still keep your dignity intact. You learn how to smile in the face of manipulation, not out of fake politeness, but out of unbreakable control over your own energy. That is what true strength looks like. Not the kind that demands recognition, but the kind that moves through fire without making a sound. And it is pain, deep, unresolved, generational pain, that gives birth to this level of power. You did not ask for it, you did not deserve it, but you turned it into something holy. And this warrior is not cruel. This warrior does not become what wounded them. No, the true warrior refuses to replicate the pain they were raised in. They learn how to break the cycle by becoming the opposite of what they experienced. They protect what they never had. They love in ways they were never loved. They create safety where they once felt threat. And they do this without needing applause, because it's not about being seen. It's about becoming whole. And this path is never easy. It requires constant inner discipline. It requires saying no to emotional patterns you once thought were normal. It requires walking away from people you thought you needed. It requires setting boundaries with the same people who raised you, not out of hatred, but out of self-respect. And every time you choose healing over harm, you train your inner warrior to lead your life, not your wounds. This transformation is invisible to most. They don't see the nights you cried without making a sound. They don't see the emotional landmines you navigate at family gatherings. They don't see the strength it takes to speak your truth in an environment that has always punished your voice. But none of that matters, because the warrior inside you doesn't need validation. It only needs one thing: alignment with truth. And pain, the very pain that tried to bury you, becomes the gateway to that alignment, not by accident, but by design, because it's only through that deep, soul-breaking pain that the unshakable, untouchable, unbreakable part of you finally steps forward and takes its rightful place. There is a quiet power in realizing that everything you lacked, everything that was withheld from you, everything that was denied, was not just a wound, but a blueprint, a silent map drawn by pain, showing you exactly what the world still needs. When you grow up in a toxic family, you become deeply familiar with emotional hunger. You know what it feels like to sit in a room full of people and still feel invisible. You know the ache of needing affection and being met with coldness, the longing for approval and being answered with criticism, the desperate wish to be accepted and only receiving rejection. And somehow, through all of this, something inside of you refuses to die. Instead, it does something miraculous. That it decides to become the very thing it never got. That is a sacred alchemy few will ever understand. Most people who are hurt others. Most people who are unloved stay closed. But the strong soul, it does the opposite. It takes that emptiness and turns it into compassion. It takes the absence and turns it into presence. It takes the damage and turns it into deep emotional awareness. You become the person who notices when someone else is suffering, even in silence. You become the one who listens, not just with your ears, but with your heart. You become the one who offers kindness, patience, and softness, not because the world gave it to you, but because it didn't. And that is the definition of strength: to give what was never given, to offer light even after growing up in the dark. This is not easy. It requires a profound level of self-awareness. It means healing your own wounds while refusing to project them onto others. It means seeing your own scars and still choosing not to pass that pain forward. It means recognizing that the legacy of hurt stops with you. And to do that, you must be brutally honest with yourself. You must face the inner voices that say you're not good enough, not lovable, not worthy. And you must speak to those voices with kindness. You must learn how to nurture the child inside you who still waits for someone to say, "I see you, I believe you, you matter." And when you realize no one else is coming to say those words, you say them to yourself again and again until your nervous system learns that safety can live inside your own body. When you give what you never received, you rewrite your entire story. You stop being a product of your environment and you start becoming a creator of your own reality. You don't love because it's easy. You love because it's necessary. You don't hold space because it was modeled for you. You hold space because you understand what it's like to have none. You don't offer gentleness because you were coddled. You offer it because you know the violence of emotional neglect. That's why strong souls become healers, mentors, protectors, and leaders. not out of ego, not out of duty, but out of deep spiritual memory. They remember the ache, they remember the silence, they remember the void. And so with every kind act, with every conscious word, with every moment of presence, they become the antidote to what once tried to destroy them. This path is quiet. There are no trophies for breaking generational cycles, no ceremonies for choosing to stay soft in a world that made you hard, no applause for loving when you were never taught how, but still, you do it. Still, you show up. Still, you give, not because you were filled, but because you chose to fill yourself. And that choice, repeated day after day, is what makes you rare. Not perfect, not invincible, but undeniably strong, because there is no greater strength than becoming what you never had and offering it freely to a world that is still learning how to love. There is a profound kind of loneliness that comes from being different within the very space that was supposed to nurture you. When you're born into a toxic family, that difference is not celebrated. It's criticized, mocked, or misunderstood. You are the sensitive one, the one who questions, the one who feels too much or sees too clearly. While others adapt to dysfunction, you resist it. While others normalize chaos, you ask why it exists in the first place. And because of that resistance, you are often set apart, not physically removed, but emotionally exiled. You become the black sheep, the misfit, the one who doesn't belong. And this exile, as painful as it is, becomes one of your greatest teachers. Isolation is not just suffering. It is sacred training for those who are meant to walk a path few dare to tread. In that solitude, something powerful begins to happen. Without the noise of approval or the illusion of connection, you are forced to meet yourself. You are pushed into stillness, into reflection, into observation, while others are distracted by performance, image, and external validation. You are learning how to be alone with your thoughts. You begin to notice the patterns, not just around you, but within you. You start to unravel the tangled web of inherited beliefs, trauma responses, and emotional conditioning. And because you have no one to rescue you from that process, you become your own rescuer. You learn how to soothe your pain without denial. You learn how to sit in discomfort without fleeing. You learn how to listen, not to the world, but to the inner voice that begins to rise within the silence. This kind of isolation doesn't just separate you from others, it detaches you from illusions. You see through the masks people wear, you hear the truth hidden beneath polite words. You sense the difference between love and control, between connection and dependence. These insights don't come through books or teachings. They are earned through the raw experience of sitting with your own brokenness and refusing to numb it. Every time you cry alone, every time you feel unseen, every time you face rejection and still choose to honor yourself, you are building an inner temple. And that temple becomes your strength. It is not made of stone. It is made of self-trust, self-respect, and spiritual endurance. The world often teaches us to fear loneliness, to avoid silence, to stay busy so we never have to face what's beneath the surface. But strong souls learn early that avoidance is not freedom. True freedom comes from making peace with solitude, because when you no longer fear being alone, no one can control you. When you know how to sit with yourself in the darkest nights, you stop seeking rescue from people who only deepen your wounds. You become sovereign, whole, and when you eventually return to the world, because you will, you do not return needy or fragile. You return grounded. You return clear. You return with a level of wisdom that cannot be faked. This sacred isolation also sharpens your empathy. Because you know what it feels like to be unseen, you naturally become someone who sees others. Because you know the weight of emotional exile, you become the one who welcomes people into the space you had to build from nothing. And yet, your kindness is not born from naivety, it's born from clarity. You do not give to be accepted. You give because isolation taught you how much it matters. You don't overextend to earn love. You offer presence because you understand the pain of its absence. That is the paradox. The most compassionate people are often those who spent years alone, not because they were unworthy, but because they were being prepared. You don't ask for recognition. You don't need the crowd. You walk through life with a quiet knowing, a strength built not in applause, but in solitude. The kind of strength that doesn't seek to dominate, only to understand. And that understanding, that depth, that unshakable peace, it was not gifted by others. It was forged piece by piece in the stillness of your isolation. There comes a moment in every strong soul's life when they look back and begin to trace the patterns, the pain, the conflicts, the heartbreaks, and something within whispers, this wasn't random. The very chaos that once felt like a curse starts to reveal itself as something else entirely. Preparation. You begin to realize that the circumstances that nearly broke you were shaping you. The emotional wounds weren't just scars to carry, they were sacred assignments, designed not to punish you, but to awaken you. Because the strongest souls do not find their purpose in peace and ease. They find it in the fire, in the confusion, in the dysfunction, and most of all, in the chaos of the family system they were born into. That chaos wasn't an accident. It was an encoded message buried deep in the noise, waiting for you to be strong enough to hear it. When everything around you feels unstable, when relationships are strained, communication is distorted, and emotional safety is non-existent, you learn to tune into something deeper. You start asking questions others avoid. You start noticing patterns others ignore. You become hyper-aware, emotionally intelligent, spiritually awake before your time, because the chaos doesn't let you rest in ignorance. It pushes you into awareness. It demands growth. It forces you to either numb out or wake up. And if you choose to wake up, even though it's the harder path, you begin to see the threads, the dysfunctional behaviors that run through generations, the unspoken grief, the emotional suppression masquerading as strength. And suddenly, you're not just surviving the chaos, you're decoding it. This decoding is not easy. It asks everything from you. It asks you to see your parents not as villains or heroes, but as wounded children who were never taught to heal. It asks you to understand without excusing, to empathize without enabling. It asks you to carry the weight of insight in a place where denial is more comfortable. But through that insight, you start to understand your role, not as a victim of the chaos, but as the one who was sent to transform it. You are the pattern breaker, the light bringer, the one who was not meant to escape the fire, but to walk into it and emerge with the wisdom to guide others through it. The chaos becomes the birthplace of your calling. Maybe it teaches you how to speak when silence has ruled your world. Maybe it teaches you to create art from pain. Maybe it teaches you how to listen so deeply that others finally feel heard. Maybe it teaches you how to hold space for others to heal because you never had that space yourself. Your purpose begins to form from the exact things that hurt the most. Not because pain is wholly on its own, but because your response to it made it so. You took the chaos and you turned it into clarity. You took the confusion and turned it into wisdom. You took what was broken and built something that can hold others. That is not coincidence. That is purpose. And as you grow, you begin to realize that your journey was never just about you. It was about those who would cross your path later, the ones still lost in their own storms, the ones still confused by their own family pain, the ones who need to see someone who made it out, not perfectly, but honestly. You become the living proof that chaos does not define you. It reveals you. It shows you who you are when everything else is stripped away. And when you accept that, when you stop resisting your story and start honoring it, you become powerful in a way that no title, no achievement, no validation could ever replicate. This power is not loud. It's not dramatic. It's steady, rooted, grounded in truth. And that truth is this: everything you endured was shaping you into someone the world needs. Not someone who escapes the fire, but someone who carries the flame with purpose. Someone who walks back into the darkness with light in their hands, saying to others, I know the way. I've been here before. And you only know that way because your purpose was hidden in the very chaos you were born to overcome.